Hey everybody, it's Honesty, and this is the Right Honesty podcast. And as you know, we are talking about the Connecticut Kings. This week, we're going to do Love on the Highlight Reel and Determining Possession, both by Christina C. Jones. And I think I know for sure these were published a year apart. Love on the Highlight Reel was published at the same time as the second Jade and Trent book, and then Determining Possession came a year later. So, Attorney General, how you doing?
I'm good, darling. Good to be here.
So first of all, before I do the overview of what the book is, we have some follow up from last week. So we talked about a cookbook in the Connecticut Kings LB CCJ verse, but actually, I went to CCJ's website this yesterday, I think, because I was looking for. There used to be like a almost like a Wikipedia of her books and characters. And I was looking for this one Chloe McKenna scene that I could not find for the life of me, but I found Nicole Falls telling me where it was. Thank you, Nicole Falls. But on Christina C. Jones' website, she's very clear that there will be no cookbook. In
Oh,
her frequently asked questions, it said, I think it said like, when are you going to do a cookbook? And she said, as soon as the ancestors give me exact measurements. So, so we can
hilarious.
assume that no cookbook is coming, because the ancestors don't tend to work like that, but we'll see. So that's where we are. So, Love on the Highlight Reel is the story of Jordan and Cole, or Nicole, depending on when you met her. And so I'll start with Jordan. Jordan is misunderstood. He looks like a bad boy, but in reality, his bad boy tendencies are motivated by his desire to prove himself to his ain't shit father. After a series of incidents that could put his career with the Kings in jeopardy, he's advised to link with publicist and reputation manager Chloe McKenna, who urges him to say out loud the things that he wants. The answers that he gives surprise her, but they also give us a window into who JJ really is and what he wants or what he thinks will make him happy. So, Cole, if Jordan is misunderstood, Cole is an open book. She is clear about what she wants and she knows how to get it. She also understands that in her line of work, there can't be too many false steps, which is why she's so careful when dealing with Jordan, her high school sweetheart, who is constantly making her job as VP of Player Success harder. She gets swept into his quest for growth because that's exactly where he wants her. And in the process, she allows herself to admit that the flame that she held for him is still very much alive. So, I said we should get right to the point here because you and I are starting this episode off at odds. JJ ruined my nerves, and you saying Cole ruined your nerves. Please tell me why, so I can tell you why you're wrong.
Yes. So it's interesting that you describe Cole as an open book because I don't agree with that characterization as it pertained to JJ. Um, I felt that she was an open book to the reader because we were in her head. So that's not being an open book. And then we began to get glimpses of her thought process in her conversations with her girlfriends. But she was not an open book to him, in my opinion. And my issue with Cole in the beginning was that she was projecting this suspicious, skeptical, and cynical energy towards Jordan as if he had betrayed her trust. That's how it came across to me, in my opinion. And so it wasn't exactly that before we knew what happened in their college breakup, it wasn't that I thought he cheated. She didn't take it that far, but she behaved towards him as if he had created the circumstances surrounding their relationship that led it to fall apart. Because I understood her approaching his shenanigans and the frustration with the shenanigans. But that's not what I'm talking about. That's Jordan, the professional, right? I'm talking about how she was interacting with him as Jordan, her ex. And when we finally learn why they broke up, I was like, well, girl, why are you acting towards him as if he made you feel like, he's not trustworthy, he's not reliable, he's not, he did things that made you believe you could not continue to be with him. That's how I felt she was coming across. So when we finally started getting to the heart of her whys, I was like, okay, well, that's not where I thought this was going. And I understood her whys. I thought her whys were valid, but I didn't think that her whys were in harmony with how she behaved towards him as a prospective, as an ex-boyfriend and someone who she was evaluating as a potential boyfriend again. Because I'm separating out his behavior as a football player from what she knew of him as a boyfriend. He did not cheat on her. He didn't behave inappropriately with women. He didn't, inappropriately flirt or anything like that. So her frustration with him about the strippers and whatnot, he's single, right? He's single. Y'all are not together. He's not cheating on anyone. He's not misbehaving, being a bad boyfriend or anything like that. And he doesn't have a track record of that. So I felt like the way she behaved towards him, she was doing a lot of projecting. And once I learned more about their history, I was like, oh girl, this is not because of anything he did. This is all you. This is stuff in your head. And I thought that was unfair. And I understood why he became so incredibly frustrated with her. And I'm not saying that he didn't mess up, because he absolutely did. But I felt like she created these conditions at the beginning of this reunion of theirs, that I was more Team Jordan, because I was kind of like, I don't understand why you're behaving this way.
Messy.
And you're not telling me and you're not telling him why you're behaving this way, in my opinion.
All of what you said just now helps me to understand that you ain't never been insecure and you don't have control issues. That's all I'm hearing.
No, what I'm saying though is that with the benefit of hindsight, right? I just felt like there were the things that Jordan was absolutely responsible for. I agree with her when she's like, you're not, I made the effort when I, had the restaurant closed and, to be responsive to your needs, and you just crapped all over it. I agreed with her on that, right? I agreed with her on the, you can't just shut down on me and lash out on me, when someone gets in your head. Agreed, full stop. But I felt like I agreed with him when he was like, you're not, like, why won't you give us a chance? Because she wasn't, in my opinion, number one, she was coming with this high level of suspicion. And then number two, she wasn't clearly articulating to him her whys. We were hearing them in her head. He was not hearing that.
So, yes, that is true, that we understood her why, but he didn't. But I also feel, so what I projected onto her because of my own lived experience is that she was the planner. She was the overachiever. They're both very young. I think he says that he's 27, which means that she has to be somewhere in that ballpark. And I think that because even after his birthday, and he talks about like how long it's gonna take them to have kids, and she has it like down to the minute what she wants to do. And we see when she gets pregnant in another book, in the last book that we get before this next series. But I felt like when they were in college, she was the grown up, and she could see his tendency of being likable and the center of the attention and this thing and that thing. And that coupled with the comments from his father, she made the decision for the two of them. Basically, she decided unilaterally what was going to protect her heart, and then also what was going to be best for him, and then also best for their relationship. So I feel like she considered that to be a sacrifice that she made on everybody's behalf. whether or not it was founded in reality remains to be seen. That's not the information that we get from the book. And of course, we could read all into everything else that could be there. But looking at Jordan now, I could completely see that a Jordan of 4 or 5 years ago was not to be tied down. And as much as he said that he wanted to be with her at 18, 19, 20, 21, I don't know that it's really that you're really capable of making such a decision. And I think she saw herself as much more mature than him. And so she made the decision for him. And by the time I read Past Interference, it was almost like um, Sloane is Jordan if I'm sorry, Sloane is Cole if Cole never meets Jordan. That like you
Mm,
go on and you become that bitch and you make decisions for the people around you to protect yourself, because we'll get to them in a
yeah.
future book, but that's kind of where I saw she was coming from. And I felt like even if or even though Cole could have been clearer about where she was coming from, I still don't think Jordan did anything close to making her comfortable doing that. And so if he knew her to
So
be
I
uptight and competitive and in her head and doing the most and got a planner and a laptop all the time and an iPad and her phone is always going on, if you know her to be that person, meet her there. And that was where I faulted him. I felt like he didn't meet her there.
so I agreed with all that you had to say about Cole and what drove her decision making back then. Um, I guess where I hold her accountable is number one, he wasn't a mind reader, right? Number two, I felt like there was ownership and then not taking ownership for the fact for what portion of that was Cole versus Jordan making Cole feel a certain way. And I'm talking about when they reconnect,
Yeah.
right? Because there is Cole saying, "This is how I feel," and I'm being so mindful of how I feel, and that's driving how I interact with my ex-boyfriend. And then there's Cole saying, "Jordan is doing these things, Jordan is behaving this way, and that's why I feel this way." And I felt like there was a little bit too much of the latter and not enough accountability and embracing the former, because she was bringing those things to the table. And then, yes, his behavior as a player, and really her beef was as the time that he spent in the strip club, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we weren't, at least what we got in the book, we weren't getting, you know, back to back women. It really, her issue with him really did revolve around the amount of time that he spent
Yeah.
in the
And he
strip
didn't
club.
manage his reputation. He was
Um,
popping off at the mouth. He was,
he,
yeah.
but that's Jordan, the football player, right? That's not Jordan, the man that I'm evaluating as a love
See, to me,
interest.
they're the same.
And well, I they are the same person, but Cole had history with Jordan, the love interest, before she had a working relationship with Jordan, the Connecticut King. So just as you said, Jordan knowing how Cole is, she's a planner, she's this, she's that. Cole had that same background intel on Jordan. And I felt that she was unfairly using some of the things that were happening on the part of Jordan, the football player, to further justify how she behaved and acted towards him when thinking about Jordan as the love
I can
interest. And
agree
I
with
thought,
that.
if you didn't know him,
No, go ahead.
but I felt like if she didn't know him from before, that's one thing, right? Because it's like, all I have is what you're showing me. She did have background, right? She knew he had more depth than that. She knew what his character was. She knew how he conducted himself as a love interest. And I felt like she was allowing the football stuff to overly color and justify her keeping the distance, when really it boiled down to, we get involved again, all of these complications that will come for me because I'm a woman in a male dominated industry. I'm already working for my father. All of that was legit. I'm not poo-pooing those concerns at all. But I wish that she had just been real about that from the door and said, and oh, by the way you're behaving doesn't help, because now I also risk looking stupid if you get caught literally with your pants down, right, at the strip club. And on top of that, people are going to say, well, I'm as in a job that I only got because of my father. I'm a gold digger, all the stuff that happened, right? But she wasn't doing it. She didn't get real about that till we were more than 50% into the book, Candid.
Oh, I agree
opinion.
with you 25%. The 75%, the 75% says if they had no personal relationship in the time from him being in undergrad, because she had to graduate. We don't know if he stayed until he graduated or if he went, after X number of years to the league. So she had to stay behind and graduate, and they were separate. She doesn't know. All she knows is what he shows the public. And so having dated, a hooker with a heart of gold or a hoe with a heart of gold, you know what I'm saying? These men who, when it's just the two of you, it's wonderful and it's warm and it's safe and it's funny and it's sweet. But the moment you leave that nigga house, all of a sudden he don't, you know what I'm saying? Like, I having done that, which is why I say I'm projecting my lived experience onto this character. Like, I completely get her saying, if all I have as a current metric of who you are is you being in the strip club, you popping off at the mouth, you doing X and Y and Z, then that's all I have. And sometimes the heart of gold don't matter if you don't know how to act and if you don't know how to treat the person. So that's the 75%. The 25% is like, yes, he really never gave her a reason to fear him. That was all like her stuff.
Exactly.
And she should have spent some time dealing with her stuff. But I do feel like, so that's why I'm kind of split, in that way. Like, she did bring baggage to the table that tainted the way that she saw him and that made the relationship almost impossible because of her own baggage. But at the same time, he needed to meet her somewhere. You can't be all the way raggedy and I just got to accept you. Like, you got to figure something out.
Was he all the way raggedy though? Was he really?
I feel like we need to stop talking.
Because hold on. I object. I'm representing Jordan now. I object to the characterization of hoe with a heart of gold, because nowhere did we get any indication.
No, we didn't. You're right.
That he was being a hoe. Again, her concern revolved around his time in the strip club and his friendship with Sin, which I understand. And side note, I love Sin's story.
Yes, and isn't it cute? Yes, her other book is so cute. Yes.
Yes. But even, Sin made it clear over and over, there's nothing going on here. Like, so it was clear that Cole's concern was not, I don't think he could be faithful. Right? That I didn't think that.
No, I don't
that
think it was
the
faithful.
issue, that she didn't think he could be.
I don't
faithful,
think it was faithful.
Right? But there's a moment where she says they're arguing, and she says, "You haven't done anything for me to be able to trust you yet." And he flips it on her. He says, "But have I done anything for you to not trust me?" And it stops her in her tracks. And she's like, "No, you haven't." And I was like, exactly, right? Because you're focused on him, quote unquote, proving himself. And you're kind of missing the point here that, like, he didn't betray you, where now he should be in a trust deficit that he has to rebuild trust. That wasn't the tenor of what happened.
No, but that was her baggage.
That's how you're treating
that was her baggage. Yeah,
I understand, but she wasn't owning that until he called her on it. I felt.
Well, I think that was true for both of them.
Different.
Like, she didn't own it until he said, have I given you a reason not to trust me? And then he didn't own how unyielding he was being until she called that out in the hotel scene.
Yeah.
after the
Yeah.
restaurant, and that when we get ready, we can transition to who needs to be stabbed, because that was the time he needed to be stabbed. But
Although let me say this about that, right? Because again, I hold him accountable for how he reacted, but I also thought to myself, that might have been avoided had she said to him, because remember, so they have the conversation. He's like, I want to be able to take you on a drive. I want to be able to date you, right? And she's like, well, I can't just do those things,
Mhm.
right? But she didn't say to him, she didn't break
She didn't
it
say I
down
can't do
for
those
him
things
to be like,
because,
listen,
yeah,
exactly. And on the one hand, somebody might say, well, he should have known that. Well, why would he know that? He's a man, right? He's not in her shoes, right? And then of course he sees for himself what happens after they're outed when he breaks his clavicle, and then and he addressed it, didn't he? Right? When it was an issue, he addressed it. He goes on Kendra's show, he does that wonderful interview. But I felt like had Nicole said to him, can we start with going out but letting me control the conditions? Can we do that? Can we kind of dip our toe in the water? She sprung it on him, and I understood it was a gesture. She wanted to show goodwill, but she didn't give him context, right? So because he was still fresh in the feelings of, you want to keep me a secret, I'm trying to show you I want something real with us again, and you're stuck on keeping me a secret. She springs this very thoughtful surprise on him, but she didn't give him the context. And he reacted horribly. I'm not justifying his reaction at all, but I am noting he didn't get the context until after. And then it was like, got it.
I just thought you were a better person than this. And I'm just grappling with the fact.
Hey, context is
But
important.
I just cannot
Context is
imagine
important.
that somebody would walk away from this like looking at her any kind of way. So this is interesting to me, but it's a healthy perspective, because I never considered things the way you did, like not even at all. Like I completely understood where she was coming from. I was like, yep, he need to realize what's going on. He needs to see da, 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 da. He's the one that needs to come to her, because he's the one that has the potential to do the most harm. But
Mm.
I mean, I guess I hear what you're
Now,
saying. I just
see,
don't
is
know.
that a gender
Is
bias?
it a what?
Is that a
Of
gender
course it is. What
bias?
do
Is
you
that
mean?
a
Yes.
gender bias? Men have feelings
Are
too,
they important is the
honestly.
question. And the answer is no.
Oh, that's so cold. That's so
While
cold.
I'm sure they do have feelings, I don't care about them. And
That's so cold. Yeah, I just kind of felt, I think it just, the way that it started for me, again, he was no saint, but I felt like she was
he was
casting
making him
him
a
in the
sinner when he
role
really wasn't.
of,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and I felt like that was being used as an excuse for her to stay away and to deny how she felt about
I mean, it could have been
it.
though. I think
And
I
like I
think we
said,
do that. I think we make up whatever reason.
we do,
It has
we
to
do.
it just has to be plausible enough for us to
Yeah,
not give it a
yeah.
second thought, that when they were in college, which I don't think you can ask a whole lot of people who are in college. But since then she should have done the emotional work to look back on that situation, and to be able to look at him and allow him to not fit into her cookie cutter box, which she wasn't asking for him to be the guy that comes to the table at their when they're having lunch, and tries to get her attention.
Right.
She's not asking for him to be in a suit and be doing everything major in that way. But I think she was giving him leeway to be who he was. I think she needed to him to have just a little bit more like emotional awareness and a little bit more maturity, like in public, so that it would not look so crazy when they showed up somewhere together. So it was almost like, and this is gonna be a stretch, but when Whitney Houston and Bobby Brown got married, people was like, wait, what? Ho, 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 wait, what? But everybody from New Jersey said,
Yes.
oh, no, no, she's from East Orange. See, y'all was
Right.
believing the machine. You was believing who
Right.
Clive Davis set up. But I'm telling you that
That's
I
exactly
know
right.
Whitney, I know Sissy, I know Dion, I know all of them. And yeah, they belong together. And so I feel
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
she did not want a Whitney and Bobby scenario where it was like, what the hell is happening here? And he at the strip club still, and he doing this still, and all of these things that are really easy for people to read into and then blame her for. And so I think, yes, I agree with what you said that she should, that there was a lot that she was making up that she didn't have any proof for. And so I think where I believed her and where I supported her was that she was looking 9 and 10 steps ahead. And it just was not, it wasn't a wise calculation until he was able to make better choices in public.
That's fair. That's perfectly fair. I and that may have been her thinking. I just felt like in the beginning that's not what we were
Yeah,
getting,
I can see that.
right? So we weren't getting that, and so I was, making my judgments based on what we were being given, and I was kind of like, you being a little you're being a little self-righteous here,
She
right? and
was
and 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 to the point where I was kind of like, so what happened in college? And then
when we finally get there.
when we learned what
Yeah.
happened in college, she didn't catch him in an inappropriate, or could have possibly inappropriate situation with some girl or anything like that. So I was like, okay, well, where is this coming from then? Because he's single and he's young and he's talented and he's got money, and listen, I will also say this: I enjoy the strip clubs, right? My husband and I would go to the strip clubs together, so I don't. I also, I probably should have mentioned that,
Hmm.
right? Because I also, as someone who, it that was never an issue
Yeah.
for when my husband would go without me. I didn't have those concerns. I didn't view it the way look, and I've got friends and family members that feel very, very differently about strip
Hmm.
clubs. So I understand. I'm
Now I be
mindful that
trying to
I
go,
think
and
that
the
was
food is
part of it
good,
as
depending on
well.
which one you go to. But anyway,
The food is good. I listen. I get great skincare tips.
exactly,
I'm like, your skin is so soft. What are you using? And
exactly.
they're like, I had this great Brazilian nut oil, and I'm like, oh, what's the name?
Get off this podcast
So
immediately.
yeah, but I was glad that she started to get real, and he also had his own come to Jesus moments, and then they were getting on the same page. And then of course, again, right, when he lets his father get into his head. So I guess, I'm kind of, know we have our, the questions we want to talk about and whatnot, who we
Hmm.
hate and so on and so forth, because that was an unfortunate
Yeah.
backslide, right? When he let his dad get into his head
Okay, so let's
again.
get into who needs to
And
be
I
stabbed
think,
because this is the stabbing moment.
yep, yep, his father, Jordan, because I'll couple it with who I hated and what
Hmm.
surprised me in one moment, right? It surprised me. So obviously, I hated his father for what he
Absolutely.
did to Jordan, what we were told he did to his mother, and what he did to
Hmm.
Jess. Um, what surprised me was that it took as long as it did for Jordan to have that liberating conversation with his mother,
Hmm.
right? Because I kind of thought, you know, after all that she had been through and whatnot. But then what I reflected on was this is still his
Yeah.
father, right? This is not some uncle or some cousin. This is your father. And so it frustrated me that it took, another dig. It took another, it took him, almost completely alienating
Right.
Cole, although to her credit, she gave him the space, but she didn't walk
Yeah.
away,
Which
you
was
know?
powerful to me because
Um,
the petty inside of me, honey.
Yes, yes. But I also thought that she viewed that as both, I'm showing you that I love you, I'm showing you that I'm here for you. And I also felt on a certain level, she viewed that as penance, right? For um I abandoned us the first time.
Hmm. Okay.
And we said we're going to do this again. I'm not going to be the one that abandons us again.
So that is insightful because I didn't see that. But it makes a lot of
Mm,
sense because she was on her best girlfriend ever, and she does say to him, I'm gonna let you have your little moment, and she talks about how like at first, she was mad, but then when he started playing better, she was kind of like, well, shit, maybe I do need to leave him alone. But
right.
for me, which is why it takes me so long to write because the petty in me, right? So in a romance, the people supposed to end up together. But when people do things, I be keeping them apart so long because the petty in
Lord.
me is like,
You're like,
you
no.
need to suffer. So like in Back to Us, like, no, suffer, choke. That's what you do, choke. I don't care about you. I want you to feel it.
And that was, well, I have to tell you what, I confess, I enjoyed every minute of that. I was like, that's right. You done lost your family, bruh. How that
You stay right up over top
because
of
you
that lady
showed your
garage.
entire,
Exactly.
yeah, you showed your entire ass. So I agree with you. And I like that, like she definitely made him feel it, right? It was like, good
Right.
game, congrats
Yeah,
on the
you're right.
win. But other than that, complete
Dry,
radio
dry.
silence, right? Because I, kind of went back to it. And he was like, you shut down on me. And she was like, yeah, well, you said you needed
Right,
space.
right,
You said you needed to focus.
right.
But I think the realization also, her realizing that once again his father had gotten in his head, and her acknowledging how powerful the father's words were because the father got in her
Right,
head,
right. Twice.
right?
Uh-huh.
So he had whammied
Yeah.
her. Granted, she was younger, but
Still.
that's also not her
Exactly.
father.
Exactly.
So that I hated him, and that was a piece that surprised me. I also It was a pleasant surprise, might be too strong. I loved when Cole showed up to take care of
Yeah,
him,
that was
because when
cute.
he's recalling, right, her anti-sickness stance, and he's like, she's not going to come, and even when she had the hospital mask and she opens up the trench
Yes.
coat, she's got her sexy little
Yes.
nurse costume
Yes.
and whatnot. I was like, okay, Cole, you are all the way in this. You are giving him 100%, and I love that, right? But CCJ just writes such beautifully
I
complex
agree. I
characters,
agree.
right? They're multi-layered, and they have people that call them on their mess. Because I love that her girlfriends were like, "Girl, stop!
Exactly.
Like, knock it
Exactly.
off!"
Yes.
Right? Because I was like, "Girl, stop! Okay, please, give me a break." And I love that he got the opportunity to reestablish the brotherhood with Trent,
Yes. Yes.
right? And having that trusted voice again, his brother on the field. And look, I can only imagine, yeah, I never played sports like that, but I can only imagine to have been at the pinnacle, and you know your brother, your friend, mentor, teammate makes this decision, as we discussed
Mm-hmm.
last week, right? You lose him, the
Mm-hmm.
team seems to go into a downward spiral, and everyone's behaving as if the responsibility lays at your feet,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So I also got his frustration on that, and how he was acting out, right? Because that also was part of why he was spending so much time in the strip clubs, of looking for a distraction and a release, and entertainment. And you also got the sense that he was quite
Yeah.
lonely, right?
Yes.
Because as sociable as he is, as life of the party as he is, he clearly didn't have other friends on the team, other
Mm-hmm.
confidants, right? He lost his confidant, not just his go-to, his quarterback, his leader, but he lost his confidant. And so I got the sense that Jordan was also quite
Yeah.
lonely, um, as well. Behind the beautiful dimpled smile, he was lonely, and he felt isolated and
Which is
misunderstood.
why it's so interesting to me because um she is a master at the smoke and mirrors. So and like make she can make you believe whatever she needs you to believe, whether it's about her, like she can spin anything. And she's very like constantly on her toes, and she can kind of sweep the room and see the next six steps in any direction, which was why it was so interesting to me that they did, how did they link up and how did they ultimately end up together, because they really are like on the face of things. Now, deep down, we learned something, we found out more about her and why they click, and kind of that becomes clear what their chemistry is. But like on the face of things, it's like, why are y'all even talking to each other? Like they don't
Yeah.
look compatible, but she's a layered person almost to a fault. Like some of those,
Yeah, I think they balanced
yeah,
each other out,
because some of those
right? I think
layers,
they balanced each other out.
exactly, some of those layers were about maintaining her own reputation and managing people's perceptions. And I mean, she was constantly
Yep.
working. She was like the damn Terminator with a chip in her head, like constantly
Yes.
calculating and assessing and
Yes.
making decisions. And as a person who lives that way, I can tell you that it is exhausting. And so for
Yes.
them, for her to be with a person who was so unapologetically themselves, and even the
Yeah.
things he asks for when he's sitting across from Chloe and she says, "What do you want?" He says, "I want to be taken seriously. I want Cole and I want my father's respect." You can make noise back because I can
Yeah.
edit. My husband just came home. So she talks about he talks about the three things that he wants. And those are things that, here again with this heart of gold, although you told me I couldn't call him a hoe with a heart of gold, this man with a heart of gold, like those are very personal things. And like that exchange with Chloe where she
Yes.
says, like, you got to say it. You have to admit what this thing is in order to get it. You know what I mean? And so, and he starts with the superficial.
Yes.
This is a scene that I really enjoyed. And also on CCJ website, it's clear to us that we're not getting a Chloe and Reggie book. But
I
but
know.
you know what? I have had enough of Chloe and Reggie that I don't need a book. But and I, sometimes I do like when authors pull in characters that won't necessarily stand alone, but who give the work life. And so in Tosh is one in Ezra's story, and then she
Yes.
shows up again with Bailani and Sadiq, who I struggle with. I keep saying that, but it's true. And so I felt like Chloe, because she shows up in all the Inevitable books. She shows up in Anonymous Acts. She shows up in the Connecticut Kings
Yep.
books. So I think it's good to have a person that's kind of a through line that kind of helps you stick with the story, even if they don't get their own. But when he's talking to
Right.
her, she really pulls out of him, I want to win the Super Bowl. And she said, well, you and everybody else. But like, what does Jordan want? What do you want that nobody else can
Yeah.
want, that's personal to you, that's requiring you to be honest with yourself and be vulnerable in this moment? And so at the end, where they have that moment where, he's able to scratch all three off the list, um, it's a real
Yep.
moment of triumph for him. And the fact that he doesn't lose his playfulness and, all of that in the process. He remains true to himself, even as he goes through this process of personal growth.
You know what I thought? I thought the conversation with Chloe was actually a therapy
Yeah,
session
honestly.
because because in the beginning, again, the dynamic between him and Cole wasn't approach. She was approaching him as ADPS to
Mm-hmm.
player, right? With this background of we dated in college and now we have this weird chemistry attraction that I'm trying to pretend doesn't
Mm-hmm.
exist, right? That was Cole.
Mm-hmm.
That was their dynamic. It wasn't one of friends, right? It wasn't one of girlfriend yet. And we weren't seeing Jordan with a friend until Trent is back on the team. And then we get to see some of that dynamic. And so I felt like the Chloe conversation was a therapy session
Mm-hmm.
with someone who had no dog in the
Yeah.
fight, right? Someone who said, "Tell me what you
Mm-hmm.
want," and really pushed him to put that in its proper
Yep.
perspective, because she wasn't talking about money, she wasn't talking about fame, right? She wasn't talking about those things. She's like, "Tell me what you want." And when given the opportunity, I loved that CCJ, and this is, one of the many things that I liked about Jordan. Jordan was not some clueless
Right.
oaf, right? Jordan was not some, pretty face, brainless, jock who it was like, Lord, without Cole, he might just fall and break his own
Right.
neck, right? No, Jordan had a good head on his shoulders because it did not take him leaving the conversation with Zoe, going home, thinking about it, and a week later he gave her those three very deeply personal and insightful
Mm-hmm.
things. He gave her those things in that
Yep. Yep.
conversation,
Yep. Yep.
right? And I thought that was showing us, this man is more than just some party, stay lick it up,
Exactly. Yeah.
stay
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
strip club. leave me alone, party and bullshit. That's all that matters, right? He is soulful and reflective and mature enough to really think about what matters to me, what do I want, and we saw what his priorities were, right? And as a result, it should have made perfect sense then that he was still allowing his father to get in his head, because to your point, his father was on the list. He was one of the three things, that were most important to him, in terms of what he wanted. So yeah, I love the Chloe, and then obviously, we got a glimpse of Chloe and Reggie in determining possession as well, right? So I agree with you that even though I'd love to get more of Chloe and Reggie, I agree with you that CCJ has given us enough, and Chloe in particular, that I don't feel robbed, right? So like, no, what, I always want more, right? For all of her characters, I'm always like, I'd gladly take more if you'd give it to me, but not necessarily left wanting.
If you had a favorite character, who was it?
I would have to say, look, I love Jordan. I really liked Mel in this, right? I liked Mel's handling of things. And look, I'm also a stepmother, so there's that too. Situation completely different. My stepson doesn't have any memories without me. I've been in his life so long. But I loved when Mel said, when they finally had the woman-to-woman conversation, and Mel was like, look, it was better for you to treat me as if I was invisible than to outright hate me, right? And she was like, this is upsetting my man, and I want to do whatever I can do to help address it. And I'm asking you, what, if anything, I can do to address it? I thought the way that she managed things with Cole was perfectly done. I thought CCJ struck the perfect balance of, two women, right? And a woman saying, look, I understand you've never been completely comfortable with me, and and we've always had this strange dynamic, and I'd love us to move past that. And can we move past it, so that when they began moving past it, it felt absolutely believable, right? It didn't feel contrived. It didn't feel, and that's, it was I really enjoyed that part of the storyline, because in the beginning I was prepared to dislike Mel as well, right? I'm like, oh Lord, got this young hot thing, now she done popped up and is having a baby, and it's like, what? You got grown kids, and you trying to have a baby?
But that's going to be a real interesting juxtaposition when we get to Parker and Rhett, because Parker's beau did the same thing, but it didn't turn out that way.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, that was just, yes. I look forward to getting to that story. So I wouldn't say that Mel was my favorite, right? I think, I really did have a sweet spot for Jordan. I felt like I just got him, right? And I was like, oh, he's a good guy. Like, he's not some reformed asshole, Again, I hold him accountable for when he showed his ass. But I was like, oh, this is so, and I felt like he was carrying the torch, and he was pushing for them, and carrying the water to make them happen, when she was still kind of like, I don't know, and so I like that as well, right? Because it's always a nice change of pace when it's the man that's like, let's do this, as opposed to the woman saying, be with me, please be with me. And so yeah. But Mel was a nice, I just really liked how that was handled, how that was done. And I embraced it, right? Because I was like, oh yeah, this probably only plays out this way in books, true. Right? Because it was a very adult, adult conversation that worked itself out without any lingering resentment. Um,
Yeah. My favorite character
how about
is,
you?
oddly enough, as much as I identify with Cole, I love Sin. And what
Okay.
what I liked about her was that if you work at a place, like Arch and Point, you got to be a special kind of person not to lose yourself.
Yep.
With
Yep.
all the money and all the access and all that, and I don't even mean sexually, to be sleeping with everybody, but just you can make every interaction, at least all the interactions under that roof, transactional. And
Yep.
so the way that she was able to, form a relationship with this person speaks very highly of him and of her. Um, and so
Yes.
even when there
Agreed.
were times
Agreed.
when, like, he talks about her, she's gonna retire, and he buys her something or something like that. And we see in her book, which I think is like Touch of Spice or Touch of Sugar, one hint
Hint
of
of
spice.
spice, I think.
Yeah,
Hint of spice, I think.
Prue is Touch of Sugar, and I love Prue and her baby fat jacket. But anyway,
Yes.
chopping down the tree. But I love that Sin was able to, develop and maintain a relationship, and I'm sure it happens often, right? But their friendship to me was just one that was really unique, and it turns out, to your point about Trent, that she was his only friend. She's the only friend that we see outside of
Yeah.
Trent, and it is
Yeah.
likely, or it could be,
Mm-hmm.
maybe not likely, but it could be that developed once Trent was gone, or maybe the seeds of it developed before he left. But once he
Right.
was gone, it really was able to flourish because she was his only outlet. Um, and so when
Yeah.
they have his birthday scene at the strip club, which I love, um, it was really a
Yes.
moment where, because Cole says when she's walking in, like, wow, they really do just look like friends, because I
Right.
think that
Right.
was probably, I don't know that she thought they were sleeping together, but I think it was just kind of nagging at her, like, what is this relationship exactly?
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
and
Yes.
knowing what the public impression is of sex workers or people who are sex work adjacent, that what's going on here. Like, she was suspicious, but
Yep.
it became clear that no, that's just the homie, like, and their relationship is really
Right.
sweet and beautiful.
Right.
um so yeah.
And again, to that point, kind of going back to that point, right? She didn't believe him, but it was like, where is that coming
Hmm.
from? That's not coming from your prior interactions with him. That's coming from your own
Okay, let
baggage.
me tell you
So
what I don't
own
want.
that,
I
right?
don't
And
want you
acknowledge
to be
that.
constantly asking her to be accountable, because in that conversation, you're asking me to be accountable. And these are the things that I hate. And so I would like for you to.
How dare I? How dare I? But it's like, look, own your
Yes,
shit,
this is
right?
true.
If we're gonna expect the men,
Yes,
if we're
yes,
gonna expect the men to own their shit, the women gotta
it's
own
true.
theirs too, right? And so I got it. I understood that outside looking in, you're like, what does this football player have in common for a
Right,
friendship,
right.
right? With this stripper who twerks in his face. And it's like, he told you she's his friend,
Hmm.
right? What has he done based on your track record with him, your interactions with him? What did he do that made you say he's lying to me?
Hmm.
Because that's basically what you were
Right.
saying, right? She was saying he's lying to me, and there was nothing, right? There was nothing. I think she had even acknowledged to herself that he was a lot of things, but he wasn't a liar. Okay, right? Now he didn't, and it wasn't until a certain point, right, where he finally said, you know, we're friends because the first time I went there, I got pissy drunk and I sat there, drunk and crying over
Hmm.
you,
Hmm.
right? She didn't know
Right.
that, but of course, based on the tenor of how their dynamic was, it's not like he would have shared that with her when it happened,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So I guess the only way that could have come out was once they had reunited. So she didn't have that background context, but it just wouldn't have been, they weren't at the place where he would have shared that with her prior to
yeah,
that.
yeah. I can
So
see that. I can see that. I am
yeah.
reluctantly accepting the fact that But it's reluctant because niggas ain't
Come
shit, and I will
on,
die on that hill.
come on. Do not lump, but you can't lump Jordan into that
I
bucket.
agree. I agree.
So that's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
All right, let's see. We have talked about surprises. We've talked about what we love. Is there anything that from what we love that we missed? I don't think so. Okay, I loved her running out onto the field at the end. That was very cute. And the biggest all moment for me that was just like, oh my God, was the picture of them at the end when they were in college. And I was just like,
Yeah.
oh my God, I'm just like completely wrapped up in these people as if they are real and they are not. But that was like such an amazing like touch to add, like because not that they matched my imagination of how these people would look, but it just so fit the moment that you could see them leaving a game or somebody party or something, and somebody
Yes.
like snaps that picture, and I was like completely like in love. I was like, oh my God.
My heart eyes moment was when he gave her
The
back the
chain.
necklace with the
Yeah, yeah,
charms,
yeah.
right? And the fact that he had kept it for 7+
Yeah,
years,
yeah.
or yeah, 7 years or so, and she's thinking, oh my God, I can't believe he held on to it. I thought he would have thrown it away. And I was just like,
Yeah,
oh,
that was a whole
right.
moment.
Because again, that's something, you know, the norms tell us that women tend to be more sentimental like
Right.
that, right? So you wouldn't have been surprised if it was a woman who had held on to that trinket, but for a man to have held on to that for that
Mm-hmm.
long, right? Almost like, I'm not giving up on us. I believe that one day we will reunite. I was just like, oh, that's so
It no, really,
adorable.
it was. And it was also
Yeah.
like it was also a part of why I think she didn't end up being like petty to the max because it was all of a piece. Like it was
Yeah.
just I know who he is, and there's a part of me that
Yes.
understands that I'm safe with him, even though I have to have all these other things on my mind. But it was just such a moment of like really him showing his heart that I was, which is
Yeah.
what made, which I think this happens before that. The book is jumbled up in my head now because I reread it so fast. But um, which was why when he comes back after they have the moment at the sushi place, and he comes back to the hotel and really is a whole asshole, like a whole one, like and she's crying and he coming to get the Archer Point card, which like if we've been talking about going
Yes.
to blow off some steam but really probably just talk to Sin like but
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
really showing how hard it was for these two people to get over their shit to be together. Like they really worked hard
Yeah.
to get together. There was a lot of
Yeah.
shit with them.
Yeah, that moment, right, where he's expecting he's just gonna
Yes,
pop in, grab the
yes.
card, and there she is, and she's been crying, and I think he was still obviously in his own hurt of, you just want to hide
Right,
me. Why are you ashamed of
right.
me? Right, not understanding. And again, she had to break it down for him, right? Yeah, I'm sure there are things, right? Again, with your husband, certainly with my husband, where it's like it's very clear in our
Mm-hmm.
heads, but it's got to be broken down for them, right? And then once she articulated it, he was like, oh my
Yes,
God, I get it
yes,
now,
yes.
right? So this wasn't a situation where she had done that before and he just wasn't hearing her. Like, I almost felt one of my notes was that Cole had talked in shorthand
Mm,
to
mm-hmm.
him, right? Like, she knew exactly how she felt. She knew exactly what her concerns were. But to a certain extent, she talked to him in
Mm-hmm.
shorthand, because once she broke it down for him, he was like, oh my God, baby, I got it. Okay, I
Yeah,
understand, right? Um, it didn't take the fallout for him to understand where she was coming
yeah,
from, right? Because that was no longer an issue,
yeah,
right? The way they were handling, the way she wanted to handle things was no longer an issue after that conversation,
yeah. That's true. That's true. I'm reluctant.
right? It didn't take the explosion
Right.
for him to finally get it. When the explosion happens, he's like, this is exactly what she was worried about, but he
He
had
had gotten it
gotten
before
it,
then. Yes. Which
you know,
thankfully,
before
thankfully,
then.
because By the
Yes,
time,
yes. But like I said, he wasn't some like clueless
right.
oaf, right? But I just felt like it's like just tell him, right? Tell him, like lay it all the way out for him, because he just wasn't understanding her, kind of high level
Hmm.
talking
Yeah,
points.
yeah. She was way
Right?
into the executive functioning.
Yeah, like this is not your elevator pitch on it.
Exactly.
Like break it down for
Yeah.
him, so that he can understand it. So
Okay, let's see. So we've done stabbed, we've done hate, we've done love, we've done surprise, we've done favorite character. What questions do you still have? Or did you have, or were there any questions you still have?
no, only because, right, as you mentioned, we get
Yeah,
updates on them in later books, right? And so the questions I have are more so the latest
same, same,
update,
same,
which
same.
I'm sure we're going to get, right? But I felt like it was left in a really good place,
I agree.
where it was, and now I'm looking forward to seeing where they are a couple of
Yeah,
years
because I
later.
want to know how the twins are. Apparently, Jordan is retiring, so I
Exactly.
need to know what this business is.
Exactly. Like
And
all
what
of
is
that.
she doing
All
with
of
the
that.
job? So did she come out? Did she stay in? Like, what's that about? So yeah,
Yep.
especially now that Eli is
Yep.
sick, and so who knows what that's about.
Yep.
So we'll see. My nerves are
Exactly.
bad on all of it. Let me say, my nerves are bad.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.